Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to all of you for staying to the bitter end of what I think has been a really interesting, very sobering, and a really diverse debate on where we go in terms of the North and Brexit. Before I just say a few words about my reflections on today, I just want to say a few thank yous. I'd really like to thank City-REDI and Raquel particularly for inviting us to be part of today's event. I'd also like to thank all of you for coming along, and also like to thank our team at IPPR North who have supported the organisation of today, particularly Rosie, who's been working really hard to bring it all together. As I was putting together a few words to say this afternoon about the North in the context of Europe and reflecting on what we've heard today, there was one particular phrase that kept coming into my mind from a poem by Rudyard Kipling. And it goes, "If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you." For me, those words from Kipling are very apt for the future of the North and Brexit, and speak to the importance of the North working as a single entity to both repel the accusations from the rest of the country that Brexit was somehow our fault, but at the same time ensure that in the negotiation process that the particular challenges and opportunities of Brexit for the North are heard both in London and in Brussels. As we've heard today, Brexit was very much the product of many years of regional disparity and a hyper-centralised governance structure that Philip McCann has so eloquently described in his remarks in the previous session. And we've had a real opportunity today to hear some of the evidence about what the implications of Brexit will be in the North. And the facts and the figures that we've heard are very startling and serious. 2.5 million jobs to be potentially affected by our vulnerability to Brexit. A reduction in GDP of nearly 14% in some areas. And this makes the status of our future negotiations on trading really important for future economic prosperity in this area. And the second thing which really hit home was that the point that those areas that voted in the highest numbers for Brexit will also be those areas that are most seriously affected by its implementation longer term. Places like Cumbria, East Yorkshire and Lancashire. And that means that instead of ignoring those places as we have to date, we have to start working for their benefit as well as the benefit of the biggest places in the North and in the rest of the UK. IPPR North have also highlighted the challenge of Brexit for other sectors. For example, the energy sector in the North is particularly vulnerable because EU energy efficiency legislation has been a significant driver of innovation, as has the EU's guidance on the eco-design of buildings. However, the North also has some of the most significant levels of carbon emissions, and there is a danger that any post-Brexit settlement means that improvements to energy efficiency and innovation may slow, with knock-on effects for business and the economy more generally. And of course, as has been mentioned several times today, our energy and our transport infrastructure has benefited greatly from the EU structural funds. And we're keen at IPPR North to examine what principles should underpin any future shared prosperity fund and how that might roll out longer term. And the lack of ideas and even discussion about shared prosperity fund at the current time from our very centralised governance system is deeply worrying. And so it's up to us to try and take the initiative on that longer term. The most problematic aspect of Brexit at the current time is the general uncertainty about what the impact will be. We've had a bit of a hint today, but until it actually happens, we won't know. Because no one has ever exited from the EU before, so we are in uncharted waters. And the challenge now for us is to take what we've learned today, take it back to our own places and start to think about how we plan and adapt in an uncertain future in the best way possible, in a way that supports those people and places who are potentially most vulnerable, whatever the case may be, post-March 2019. The other thing that's been talked a lot about today, though perhaps less obviously, is the emotional impact of Brexit. Tom Reardon talked this morning about the way it felt on the day of the election. And we've done some research recently within start-up businesses, and many of them spoke of the emotional impact of Brexit, that sense that the UK might be less welcoming for businesses in the future, and that it was more about perceptions of what might happen or what government might do rather than the actual reality. And that emotional impact of Brexit, as well as the economic effects that we've heard about today, is also something we need to keep in our minds as we move forward and taking care of people and places who have been most seriously impacted by the results. But having said all that, we have to move forward. We have no choice. And as we've started to explore this afternoon, there are some reasons for optimism. The fact that we're having this discussion, the fact that we're highlighting the disparities and the centralised nature of government in the UK means that at least we're starting to use Brexit as a lever to prise open some of those difficult questions and hopefully, over time, start to come to terms with them. At IPPR North, we argue for the need for, if we're going to have Brexit, it needs to be a progressive form of Brexit, if it's possible even to ever achieve that. And that means four things, really. First of all, it means voice and devolution. And it means that the North needs to be able to make sure that that voice is being heard as a single entity at the negotiating table at government. We've had some devolution to date, but that devolution is very patchy, it's very piecemeal, and it's very uneven. And it actually helps to create new sort of disparities between places than we've had before. And the feeling from Westminster is that they're too embroiled in the Brexit to think about devolution. And we argue that that devolution process needs to continue so that places can start to move forward themselves to make decisions about what needs to change in the context of Brexit. And that also means a discussion about the repatriation of powers, not just to Westminster, but to the regions longer term. So that's the first thing, voice and getting devolution up and running again. Second, there's a point about resources, because power is nothing if you have not the resources to do anything with it. And we, IPPR North, feels that the North has an opportunity to develop some of the ideas and solutions about how a future shared prosperity fund might work. As Katie Schmucker was just saying in the previous session, those of us who've had to grapple with EU funding can certainly envisage a better way of running a structural fund. But it's how we actually do that in the context of the North and the wider UK and what challenges and issues we want to prioritise. But there is an opportunity for us to try and set the agenda on that and underpin it with some key principles going forward, particularly around economic justice and a narrowing of the gap between the London and the South East and the North. So that's funding. And thirdly, it's about place preparation. Place we've heard a lot about today. The fact that place is still really important, that geographical location and identity is still a really important component of our economic system. And we're doing some research at the minute looking at the position of place and the relationship with business. And we're finding that businesses value places because of the quality of life that they provide and the quality of people that they can help to produce to support business and innovation longer term. So place is really important. But for too long, we've only focused on certain places, the biggest places, the places with the most income and wealth. And we argue that going forward, we need to think about the role and value of small and medium-sized places in the North, many of which voted for Brexit. Instead of trying to forget these places in the hope that the impact of city growth will eventually trickle down to people in the smallest and the most medium-sized cities, we need to face up and lean into the debates taking place outside the big cities. Just because we do not like the result of Brexit does not mean to say we deride the people and places who voted to leave. But it does mean that we need to consider the reasons and the rationale behind that decision. And then fourthly, it's about an outward-looking North. The North needs to work as a united voice, but it also needs to be a coherent and recognised region within a European and global context. And that perhaps is our best chance for the future. And as we spoke about earlier in some of the discussions, that's about thinking about the links that we do have already and about thinking of ourselves as a one organisation instead of trying to fight amongst ourselves. And it's about building on the relationships that we already have. And I think working as a united region, if you like, within the UK and within Europe is perhaps the best chance for the North to keep its head in the context of Westminster potentially losing theirs. We're going to be working on these projects, on these issues over the next coming months in the run-up to March 2019 and probably beyond. So if you want to find out more about our research or would like to work with us in any way, please do get in touch. And I just want to say thanks again to you for coming and to City-REDI for involving us in today's event. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. And so I'm going to also try to reflect, but I'm going to try to reflect about the 4 workshops that we have had, because today is our last, let's say, step in our touring. So we were even joking City-REDI is touring in the UK, because all our team has been somehow moving from Edinburgh to Birmingham to London and now to Leeds. So what we have been hearing all the time is a question about the legitimacy. So many people have said, and today Anand was saying as well, that we are living in a unique moment in the UK history. So this is something that has changed the perception of the policy in the UK. And then many of our panelists have also made a huge self-reflection of the Brexit vote. Why we had this Brexit vote? It was a problem of misinformation. It was a problem of immigration. It was a problem of disaffection, disengagement. Also, we have been hearing all the time about this huge dichotomy. So there is a huge division that it seems that has been present in the fact that Brexit is going to impact differently places, industries, and people. And this division seems to be higher if it is not being tackled properly. So we have seen that there are some panelists that they have been talking about how places or businesses are going to adapt to Brexit. So they have been talking about the challenges that those places, businesses, or even actors might have. They have been talking about that there has been a quite huge inertia of places that they have used doing things just because without repairing of what was the history, the path dependency, or even the future of doing things maybe differently. Many also in our sectoral panels, they have been talking about the complacency of SMEs, for instance, a kind of inertia that it probably will have now a kind of payoff, the fact of not being prepared for potential situations that Brexit will bring. So today we have been talking about resilience as well. So again, is this self-reflection of are we prepared for this Brexit? Which is the Brexit that we are going to have? Nobody knows. So many panelists have exposed the fact that this misinformation is also making probably for many industries is making them to incur in cost that they probably will not have had if the government will be more explicit of what we are going to have. So I will finalize talking about some opportunities that I have heard in these 4 events. I think that many of the places in the UK and many of the industries are trying to think differently, so are trying to take this as an opportunity. We have seen that the private sector is trying to somehow motivate firms and actors, trying to reconnect with the people, so trying to put actors together. So there is probably an opportunity of potential interregional cooperation, so cities that they join forces in order to have their say. And maybe this interregional cooperation, it can be coming from a geographical kind of extent, like cities in the north or places like the both nations. In the case of sectoral deals, we have also seen that I think that industries are more conscious about the value chains, so they see the value chains as something more present, and we have seen some cooperation between different industries that they might work in different parts of the value chains. So at the end, everybody is trying to talk that the best solution will be to have a Brexit that is progressive and also inclusive, right? A Brexit that somehow takes into consideration as many actors, industries and places as possible. And I think I'm going to finish with that. I think it's a bit more positive. In some of our workshops, I saw people leaving, and I was asking, are you leaving? And say, yeah, this is so depressing that I cannot stay for longer. So I agree with some of them, but I try to be positive. So I also kept some of the positive notes from all of these 4 events. I will finish with big thanks. I always thank all the people for coming. If you were not registered, we probably, this event will happen today. So thank you for coming today. Thank you to my colleagues for helping me. Thank you to IPPR North for joining us in this last workshop. Slides are going to be shared after the consent of the presenters. I will say that if you want to follow all of our work, you can follow us in the website of the project. Also, you can follow all the work done by IPPR North, and also the work that other researchers are doing under the UK and Exchange in Europe initiative. It's a very good site where you have videos and you have logs and you have all the academic reports. I just finished because this is an ESRC project, so we need some feedback out of this event. So in your delegate packs you have a feedback assessment form, and I'm asking you to please fill in this form to get some insights of what have you thought about our contribution, and also about what you have learned from this event. So thank you very much again, and we continue in contact. Thank you.